Alrighty, good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good day. I've been quite excited for our guest today because I've seen him on, probably five different podcasts that I watch. A few visits on each one. I first saw him on Jack Murphy's podcast, and was very intrigued. Of course, we've had a lot of Vietnam era Rangers, LERPs on, but hearing about the more modern day GWAT vets, we started hearing a little bit about RRD, and that piqued my interest. And it kind of felt like a modern day SOG. So we're gonna have a vet today that was in RRD, or actually, I think it was two different incarnations while he was in, but we'll get to that. But our guest today is Mr. Mike Edwards, and I dare not go through his whole resume. We'll go through that because I inevitably will mess something up. But Mr. Mike, thank you for joining us, and I hope you're having a good day today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be able to join you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Everybody, if Mike freezes up a little bit, be cool. He's down here around my way, so we're having a bit of a storm pass through, and his connection may freeze up for a minute, but he'll be right back in. So everything will be good. So we're gonna get right into it. And guys, if y'all have got questions or anything, go ahead and start popping them in as we start going, and we'll hit them. And if he's in the middle of a story, we'll wait and we'll get into them. So, considering you're now retired and in mine, or I should say retired from the military, you're down in my neck of the woods down here in the South. Where did you originally grow up?
So I originally grew up in Alabama too. So I was born in Selma, Alabama, and grew up in an area out in the country, out from Selma, Alabama. And I grew up hunting in the woods, running around shooting BB guns, doing stuff like that, just like a standard Southern Alabama boy, I guess. But not from, this region where I live now, but grew up more in that area and then settled down in this area after I retired and bought some land.
Oh, yeah. Selma. My mom used to work out towards Selma, and it's definitely got its rugged, woody backcountry areas. So yeah, you can definitely. As a matter of fact, I think that my uncle's got some hunting land out near Selma. So yeah, I can imagine you had a lot of fun growing up out there. We always ask, and it's pretty interesting because most of our vets are Vietnam veterans, so we get a mix of either a Korean War grow up story or a father or grandfather from WW2 or maybe even WW1. Did your father have any military history or any family members that had any military history?
Yeah, we had some family members, and the closest was, my dad. My dad joined the Army and was in the Army before the war, after Vietnam and after all that stuff, because he didn't join the military until later in life.
Oh, wow.
I think he was about 30 when he joined the military. And so he came on, or he went in as an officer, did a bunch of time, then ended up going active duty guard. And then he actually deployed to combat after I did, though, because, and my brother also went in as well. He was a helicopter crew guy. And then it's interesting. The one time my dad and my brother both deployed to combat was the one time I was in the pipeline for RRC, and I didn't deploy and I didn't get to see him. Like, out of the 18 trips over there, that one that they did, I didn't even get to join them with it. So
that's so crazy. The number of deployments, but those two were in combat together or there in the same time. That I always find that interesting as well. My father and grandfather happened to do that. Didn't serve together, got to see each other, but that's really cool. And there you were in the pipeline. And
as much as I've deployed, the one time they were deployed, I wasn't there. I'm like, come on, man. I was there like constantly. I just came from there and just went right back after they left, but I missed them while they were there.
Those odds, I mean, that's just crazy. Absolutely crazy. Joining at 30, that's pretty, nowadays, I guess that wouldn't be too rare, but that seems kind of rare. What did he have what made him want to join up so late in life?
Oh, I'm not sure. I think he was just doing the normal life thing. He was working for my granddad, working, managing his store and stuff like that, and doing things for him. And then he was doing some construction stuff on the side. I think it just wasn't enough to pay the bills. And maybe the Army was starting to offer a little bit more money at that time. And it was like, hey, maybe this is a thing to do. And so he went in to be an officer too. So obviously the pay is a lot better as an officer anyway. So yeah, he went in and did that, and then that became his career.
So he stayed in, and what did he end up retiring as?
He ended up retiring as a full bird colonel.
Holy cow!
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Wow. That's quite the three of you with the military history there. That's amazing. I'm always just blown away at some people's military history. We've spoken to one vet that had two. His father was a Green Beret, his brother was a Green Beret, and he was a Green Beret. Two were in SOG, and the father was older, and I think was already a light colonel at that time. So that's just amazing. Like you guys, a little more modern day version of that. Um, what was high school like for you? Did you growing up with your father joining the military, and I guess with him being in his 30s, you were somewhat not grown, but a little bit older to kind of see what was going on at that point in time. Did that have an impact on you, or did you have some at high school that you saw a movie, or what brought you wanting to join up?
Well, my dad never pressured me, and like anything that he did, for some reason, it didn't really appeal to me because, I saw him doing the military thing, but it was just regular conventional military thing. And like, I wanted to be like Rambo or like Commando. You know what I mean? We watched Rambo and Commando and, Arnold Schwarzenegger and
Yeah.
Sylvester Stallone and all those movies growing up. So that's the kind of stuff I wanted to do. And I didn't know where to do that at. But I just knew that I wanted to go in the Army. I knew it was a bigger branch, and I knew there was a lot more opportunities within the Army. So I joined the Army, and then ultimately had started off to be Special Forces because my dad, that's what he knew of. He was like, hey, Special Forces are the best. They're the elite of the elite. That's what he told me. And I was like, all right, cool. From what he knew.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I had planned to do. I didn't know anything about Rangers or anything like that. And then took the PT test, did all the screening and stuff like that to go to Special Forces, to SFAS. Had a date to go and everything like that. And then ended up getting orders to go to Korea. So I never ended up making it. And then later found out about the Ranger Regiment. So yeah, my dad tried to talk me into doing, the special operations thing because he knew I wanted to do that. And I had seen SF guys. I actually was in a National Guard SF unit while I was in college. So I got to train with dudes who at one time were former SF guys, but now they were National Guard. And it was really good. I learned a lot from those guys. They were very professional, very squared away. So that's what I wanted to do. And then, like I said, later on found out about the Ranger Regiment and thought that would be a better option. And that's what I ended up doing.
Wow. So, where did you go to college to be with a reserve or National Guard Special Forces guys?
I was in Alabama. I went to college at Marion Military Institute.
Oh,
yeah. And while I was in Marion Military Institute, I drilled with a Birmingham National Guard unit, the 167th Mechanized Infantry. Well, then I transferred over after I went to airborne school as a cadet. After being airborne qualified, then I could be in an airborne unit. And the only National Guard airborne unit was the Special Forces Group, 20th Group. So I was in, I think it was Bravo Company, 20th Group, which is in Auburn. And I drilled with those guys a little bit. And we did a lot of hardcore ruck marches and stuff in the National Forest, long distance ruck marches, 20, 30-mile ruck marches, which built me up and got me set for, RRC and being in the Ranger Regiment too. But it was good, man. And the guys were very professional, and I learned a lot there. And that's what really convinced me to go SF. But then when I went active in the Army, the SF pipeline just didn't work out for me. I just ended up moving to other places. And then by the time, it delayed the process a little bit, I ended up deciding that I wanted to go to the Ranger Regiment because I had found out about that, and it appealed to me a little bit more.
Wow. That's quite the interesting the pipeline from college and being a Marion, man, that's heavy duty. That's like West Point of the South. Although, what's the other one in Virginia? VMI, Virginia
Yep.
Military Institute. Yeah, I've got a few friends that went there, and that's the other one. I'm sure they'd beg to differ on what I just said about Marion.
Yeah.
uh,
A
so,
little bit
but
of a rivalry. Marion is like, I'd love to go back there. They it was small school and really struggling when I was going through there, but they've gotten a lot more funding and stuff like that now. It's way nicer, got a lot more amenities and a lot more things to offer than it was when I was there. But it's still a good school, small school environment, very intimate school environment. You know.
oh yeah, and around here and in the military, I'm sure having that on your resume looks quite well. Going anywhere. You mentioned a minute ago that you winded up in. Did you say Korea a second ago?
Yeah. Yeah, I did a couple years in third Infantry Division at Fort Benning, Georgia,
Wow.
mechanized infantry, and then ended up getting moved to Korea. And then when I took off and went to Korea, I tried to get into the airborne infantry unit there, but I just missed it. I can't remember what happened exactly. Something to do with, like, I don't know, the timing of when I got there. So I ended up going to a mechanized unit there too. And was kind of bummed because I was like, man, I want to do cool stuff. At least I could be airborne and jump out of planes. So I was airborne qualified, but I'd never jumped out of a plane outside of airborne school at the time. And I'm like, come on, man, I just want to use my skills. And then, so yeah, I got stuck there as mechanized infantry. 9/11 happened while I was in Korea. So
Wow.
the World Trade Center stuff happened while I was in Korea, watched it on the TV. And then by that time, I was most of the way through my time in Korea and had committed to getting out of the Army. I hated the Army so bad.
Wow.
Because all of my time in the regular Army, from the time I went in until 9/11, I had just been like a glorified janitor.
Mm.
We didn't shoot guns at all. We hardly ever shot any ammo. We occasionally shot some blank rounds at each other with like miles gear on, but I was mainly in the motor pool, like tearing apart tracks on Bradleys and like changing the oil and cleaning up oil spills and like cutting the grass and cleaning the bathrooms. That's mainly what I did for the first few years I was in the Army. And then the rare occasion you'd go to the range and train. And it was, I mean, the training, like, it's like you get past it in 5 minutes on the training range now when I train civilians, you know. It was such basic training that I was like, God, this sucks, man. I just didn't like it. So then when 9/11 happened, I was like, well, because we weren't at war. So once that happened, I was like, well, I got to stay in now. And I got to find a unit that I can get involved in that's going to do real stuff. And so I bumped into a guy while I was in Korea. The dude ended up, I heard he got killed later on during the invasion of Iraq. He was in a mechanized unit at the time. But this guy had been in third, I think, I can't remember. He was in one of the Ranger battalions. And he was a good guy, but the Ranger Regiment's a hard place to stay in. So this guy had gotten kicked out of the Ranger Regiment and had to go to Korea, but he was still a good example, making the Ranger Regiment look good, physically fit, squared away, a leader in charge of everything. So we were doing this 30-mile ruck march called the Manchu Mile in Korea. And it's not like, you got like 35, 45 pounds, rucksack's light, but it's walking on roads, but you're walking up mountains, you're walking over some mountains too. And people are complaining and stuff. And then we get to the halfway point, we drop our rucks, and they got fruit and they got water and they got little snacks and stuff that we could eat. And I'm hitting it up and I'm like, man, I love this stuff. And this dude, I used to like dip back in the day. So I had a big old fat dip of Copenhagen. And like, I love this stuff. And this guy was like, if you can say that in the middle of this ruck march, you need to be a Ranger. He's like, because Rangers ruck march a lot. And you have to be able to carry a lot of weight a long ways to be there. And then he started explaining a little bit to me about it. And so that convinced me. He's like, man, you need to go to Ranger Regiment. He's like, there's a war going on. It's the fastest place you can go to and get into combat and fight the enemy. And he's like, and if you want to fight, that's the place to be. They're going to fight more than anybody. He told me Special Forces, Green Berets and stuff, they may get out and fight a little bit too, but their main goal is to train others to fight. Mm-hmm. So if you want to fight directly, the Ranger Regiment is one of the best places to go. So that's what I did. I re-enlisted to go there and ended up going to the Ranger Regiment, the 3rd Ranger Battalion.
Wow. That's I always find that very interesting with you guys about where you're wanting to end up and how you inevitably end up there. And some guys either just working their way and either luck or fate, whatever you has it, they're easily pulled in that way. Or you guys in just random situations say something or around somebody and someone's like, oh, by the way, have you heard of this group or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, okay. And boom, there you are. That's always interesting to me about you guys finding where you want to go. Yeah, it's like
that because, units like RRD, RRC kind of units or Delta Force and stuff like that, they're not really advertised. There's a lot known about them now, but back when I was going to join them, there was nothing known about them back then. It was super secretive. People knew certain things, but it was really secretive. And so you had to kind of seek out knowledge yourself or like kind of know of guys that have been there. But the cool thing is in the Ranger Regiment, and that's one of the things I like to tell a lot of people, the 75th Ranger Regiment is a really good organization. And the proof is in the pudding, right? Well, a lot of like Delta Force and RRC recruit heavily from there. So that's proof. So they have their recruiting briefs that come in. So being in the Ranger Regiment, you get to hear all these recruiting briefs because these dudes are trying to recruit from that pool of guys. They recruit from Special Forces and other places too, but the vast majority of their guys come from the Ranger Regiment because, and a lot of people don't realize this, people ask me to contrast the different special missions units, right? And one of the things I like to tell them is the difference in the units, like for example, the DA units, you got Delta Force and SEAL Team 6. SEAL Team 6 pulls from the Whiteside SEAL teams. That's where they get the majority of their guys. The majority of those guys don't have a lot of combat experience. Believe it or not, they do. Some don't. It's just a mixed bag. Some have a decent amount of experience, but some don't. But virtually none of them, not really many of them, have experience working with JSOC. So when a Navy SEAL, a Whiteside SEAL goes and tries for SEAL Team 6, he's now in a Tier 1 unit, but he has not really a lot of experience and doesn't have experience doing the job in the way JSOC does the job. So Rangers are the best place to grab people from because you got Rangers that are doing the same kind of job, very similar. They're doing the same missions as Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 in Afghanistan, day in and day out, using the same assets, using the same chain of command, using the same infrastructure. So for Delta Force, when they pull a dude from Ranger Battalion, he's already been doing the same kinds of missions, using the same equipment, using the same assets, talking to the same people. He's got the same group of friends, right? So when they pull that dude, he's got experience, tons of combat experience and actual practical, tactical experience. So it's just, that's the reason a lot of people like to explain to people, that's the difference between Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 is where they pull their people. Delta Force is able to pull from a lot more depth, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so does RRC. I mean, RRC pulls from the regiment and some of these other groups too, but a lot of guys come from the regiment and even dudes from the regular army, but they have that depth. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's that when we get to RRC, that was interesting part about non-regiment guys coming in that I found pretty interesting. But when you first get into the regiment, are you immediately start training up with guys you're going to be with, or are you going to Ranger school? What's going on when you first get into the regiment?
So when I first got there, I was an untabbed E4. So that means I was an E4, but I didn't have a Ranger tab. And even though Ranger school, for a lot of people out there that may not know, Ranger school has nothing to do with the Ranger Regiment. It's just a school to teach people outside of the regiment kind of what it's like to be a Ranger. But it's held in very high regard within the Ranger Regiment. It's kind of a check the box type school because it does suck. It is a challenging school, or at least it used to be. It used to be considered the hardest school in the U.S. military, compared to everything. I don't know that it's that way now, but it used to be tough. Well, you get there, you're training with the dudes that you're gonna deploy overseas with, and your deployments are gonna come quick, especially during the GWAC, because we were turning and burning constantly. So you're training with those guys, but then you're also trying to prepare for Ranger School because you got to get there first. That's one of the first hurdles. And so for me, I got there, we trained. And then I did some overseas stuff for training, like went to Thailand, did some stuff there, came back. And then we got called up to jump into Iraq. So I had not been to Ranger School yet, but I was getting ready to go, and they delayed me going so that we could jump into Iraq. So I jumped into Iraq, did that deployment, came back from that deployment, went straight to Ranger School.
Holy cow. I guess that's a good reason to be delayed for Ranger School to get a combat jump in, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you're a brand new guy in the military, all these badges and these awards look all cool and all. Like now, like I'm just like, whatever. I've got most of all of them anyway. So like, who cares? But when you're a new guy coming in, like you want all these things. You want the combat badge. You want your EIB, your expert infantryman's badge. You want your wings, your jump wings, but you want your jump wings to have that wreath, your master. And then you want the combat jumps on there too. Same thing with free fall and all these different things. And so on that deployment, I got to knock out a lot of those things real fast. I got a combat infantryman's badge, which is a huge one. I got a combat jump star mustard stain on my jump wings. And then I also got a combat patch for having deployed to combat with 3rd Ranger Battalion. So that was huge. Come back from that. And even though it wasn't exactly what I thought combat was going to be, that first one, still, I came back as a combat veteran, could wear this cool stuff on my uniform for the first time. And that was kind of cool.
Wow. I didn't even realize that's knocking out a lot. You come back and you've got quite the little developing fruit salad on your chest there.
Yeah, as an E4. I mean, you got to look at that. As an E4 in the Army, I had a combat infantryman's badge and a combat jump in a combat zone and a combat patch with 3rd Ranger Battalion. That's a huge thing back then. Like looking back on it, it's like, whatever, who cares? But back then it was huge because not a lot of people have been to war yet. Only really Rangers have been to war. And then Iraq was kind of where everybody else started getting into it. But Rangers and like the JSOC guys had already been on a couple deployments. So that was our first one to Iraq, and I was on it. So it was cool. I got to get in on it at the beginning.
You mentioned earlier about being able to carry heavy loads and ruck not only long distances but with heavy loads. Did I hear correctly when you jumped or when you guys were jumping that it was like at least 100 extra pounds just the ruck when y'all jumped?
Oh yeah, our rucks were at least 100 pounds. They weren't big rucks. They weren't recce rucks like what we carried in RRC, but they were. I think they were large rucksacks, or maybe we had extra large. Yeah, we had extra large rucksacks, Alice packs, and they were packed out with everything. And yeah, the average person probably was jumping about 100-pound rucksack under the round static line parachutes, which were not that great. So, and then the means in which we came in and jumped to, like, there was guys that got hurt. A lot of guys got hurt on that jump.
I thought I remember on one of the interviews you did that the pilot or the plane did some kind of weird maneuver and then y'all are jumping off and several people, I thought I heard a broken back or something maybe, and that's just terrible. Yeah.
I think somebody broke a back. There were people that broke legs. One guy went out and fumbled somehow. His leg got caught in a riser. So it opened the parachute with his legs sticking up. And then there was one leg sticking down. He had to land on the leg that was down and snapped that on the ground. The one that was in the riser was snapped already, and then he had to land on that one and snapped it. It was brutal, man.
That's gnarly.
They did an after action on that and determined that we tried to carry too much equipment. The parachutes they could handle it, but it was just too low. We didn't have a lot of time for that. You know, it's really, I guess, slow you down because we're coming in and jumping out and we're just boom hitting the ground because we're so low.
With everybody hitting in such a heavy load, what was the next task? Getting getting on the ground? Were y'all clearing the area? What was going on with the jump and all these injuries, shall we say, on the ground?
Yeah, so all the injuries are taken care of. They get called up right away. There's already a plan in place on how to deal with them. They'll get picked up by people and ushered to like a central area where they can be gathered up and treated. They'll be treated on site and en route. But then the rest of us were clearing the airfield, clearing out our sector. Wherever you land at, you're kind of clearing everything around you. And then there's other things that we have to do on the ground. I won't get into the specifics on that stuff, but just clearing the area. And then we moved out towards the target, which was a big oil refinery type deal. And there were a couple cars as we were coming down our canopy. You could see them driving off and see their headlights driving away. So I assume the enemy must have, if there was enemy there, had seen us, and they just decided, well, we don't want to mess with a bunch of paratroopers jumping out of the sky. So they rolled out, and then the objective was essentially clear. There was nothing there, but it took us a while to clear it because it was a massive, massive objective, and we cleared it with one Ranger company. We could have probably had an entire battalion there to clear this objective, but we cleared it with a Ranger company, and it took probably, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. I can't remember how long, but it was a while.
Other than the cars getting the heck out of Dodge, no action, no gunfire or anything.
No action. It was pretty dead, man. Then we set up that area as a base of operations and started launching out missions from there. So that's what we jumped in. We seized the airfield and used it as a staging base. That's essentially what it was. There wasn't they thought that there could be some people defending it, but they didn't know for sure. The intent was to use it to stage out of. It was deep into Western Iraq, so we could plunge into Western Iraq, get into Northern Iraq, and then it was away from Baghdad. So the flight paths in there could be free of Baghdad airspace as well. Because the original plan was to jump into Baghdad, but they figured most of our planes would have got shot down doing that.
Wow. That would have been a doozy, jumping into Baghdad like that. Wow. So you mentioned staging more missions from where you guys had just cleared everything out. Are you guys that make the combat jump, are y'all on the ground and staying for a while and running missions? Are y'all going back stateside fairly quickly, or do y'all continue a full-on tour here?
Yeah, we stayed there and did the missions on the ground. So once we jumped in and seized the airfield and took it, then we brought in big planes that were bringing in Humvees and stuff, and they started offloading the Humvees. We bring those out. We start getting them set up with all of our tactical gear, our big guns, our heavy guns, and all that kind of stuff. So we seized the airfield to get a foothold into the country, and then we can bring anything we want in, because the whole airfield is seized and controlled by Rangers. And then we have combat controllers, Air Force combat controllers on the ground. So it's essentially an international airport now. Like, we can do whatever the heck we want. And then we bring those dudes in, and then we started bringing in all of our equipment that we need and pushing out. I mean, they start fortifying our position, making it better in case bad guys come at us. So we're building in fighting positions around the position. And then after that, just waiting on missions, and then missions would come down and we would punch out and do like an ambush on a road on fuel supplies, or we would do ambushes here or there, or do a raid on this or raid on that. One of the things that we did is we cleared a massive complex of like bunkers. Like, these were those like pyramid shaped bunkers that you see that has like a concrete face and then they're covered in dirt over the top of them. Mm-hmm. These bunkers were like probably that like huge, but then 100 yards long. And there were so many of them, it would be like hundreds of acres worth of these things, as far as you could see it everywhere. And we started clearing those things and breaching the doors on them. We found all kinds of mustard gas and weapons of mass destruction type stuff, like chemical warfare type stuff, and had to back off of that stuff.
Holy crap. Wow. That's that's the fabled Ranger mission, though, getting in on an airfield and taking it over. That sounds like, other than, of course, the injuries with the jump and everything, it sounds like that it couldn't have gone off any better for you guys.
Yeah, it went pretty smooth, essentially. I mean, it went as planned, so you can't beat that, you know?
Wow. That's awesome. And historically, I mean, you being a part of that, that's, when was the last, was Grenada or Panama the last Ranger jump?
Yeah, I think Panama was the last Ranger jump, as far as I know, yeah. Well, the last jump period in combat was probably Panama, and that was Rangers. And then before that, Grenada. And then trying to think before that would have been, can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, not Rangers 173rd jumping in Vietnam. I'm sure somebody in the chat will obliterate me, but I'm past Vietnam. I'm just grasping at straws here.
Yeah, sucks when it comes to a lot of stuff too.
So you guys, I know that just popped into my head. I thought I remember hearing on one of your other interviews. Did you come across? Was it some foreign special forces? Did you see SAS guys around this time when you guys jumped in at the airport?
Yeah, there were some SAS dudes there. There was Delta Force dudes there. There was a mixed bag of people from JSOC as well. And we were launching. I don't know what their missions were because at that time I was so low level that I didn't know. I just knew what we were doing, and these guys were rolling out doing their stuff, and we were rolling out doing our stuff. And that was at the time where what Delta Force was doing was a lot different than what Rangers were doing probably at that time. And then it morphed really quick as we started really getting sucked into Afghanistan and Iraq and had everything dispersed. There was just not enough people out there to do all these raids. So Rangers started coming in and doing the same types of hits. And it's really the only thing that we trained to do anyway. So we're good at it. And then, I mean, it's not the only thing we train to do, but it's one of our primary tasks is conducting a point raid on a building, doing CQB. So they brought Rangers in, and Rangers started just swacking targets as effectively as anybody else, and in certain cases more effectively. And I don't know if that's because, Rangers had something to prove. They're like, hey, you're giving us a shot. We're going to prove that we can do it better than anyone. But for example, in one outstation, I remember up in in Mosul in 2005, I remember our element, we had the highest success rate on kill capture of targets in like all the task force at that one point in time. We had like a 90 something % success rate where if the dudes were out there, we would roll after them and either get them or kill them, one of the two, but we were that successful. So we trained and did it a lot, man. And we got really, really, really good at it because there was tons of that work to be done.
Wow. That I recently read Relentless Strike, and that's kind of where, other than hearing your first interview way back when, 3-4 years ago, and then reading this book and getting a renewed interest in it since starting these SOG interviews, I was just surprised at how much it really ramped up for the Rangers there, as you mentioned at the start, Iraq, Afghanistan, and then towards the end. I mean, they were, as you mentioned, right there running JSOC operations and kicking in doors. And I think there for a while they actually had a Ranger leading a task force that Delta and the Rangers were in there for a while.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people don't realize. So the JSOC task force overseas was broken up because it was big. It was all over the place, right? You had SEAL Team 6 had control of the Horn of Africa, Delta Force had control of Iraq, and the Ranger Regiment had control of Afghanistan. So all the Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 dudes that worked in Afghanistan were for a significant portion of that time working under the Ranger Regiment. And then the same thing, like, for example, when I went to Africa and did that stuff in the Horn of Africa, I was working for SEAL Team 6. Even though I was a Ranger, my parent command was SEAL Team 6. So, like, even the dudes in my team, whether SEAL Team 6 dudes, I was the one Ranger. But then the group above us, there was like a mixed bag there. But our chain of command, we reported directly to SEAL Team 6, who reported then to JSOC. So that's just the way it works. A lot of people don't realize that. And the same thing in Iraq. If you were in Iraq during that time frame, you were working underneath Delta Force. Whether you're a SEAL Team 6 guy or a Ranger or whoever, you're reporting to a Delta Force commander, but who's ultimately reporting back to the JSOC commander. But that's the way it worked, man. And yeah, the Ranger Regiment was in command of the JSOC task force in Afghanistan from probably about the midpoint of the war until the end.
Wow. That's interesting. I was always intrigued about just how that worked like that over the various task force. I mean, the different names, the colors that they had for cover and all that, I was just getting bogged down in it. But that's nice to hear it broken down and putting into terms like that where you can actually understand it.
Yeah, and you would have, and one more thing too, like you would have in certain places, like even in Afghanistan, right, where you would have, and I'm just making stuff up. None of this is real, but this is kind of the gist of what it says. So, like, don't take these names as anything specific. But let's say Kandahar, right? Let's say we have a task force head in Kandahar, or in southern Afghanistan or whatever. That is, let's say that's RC South or Task Force South. It could be commanded by a Ranger battalion commander. And then he has like 3 or 4 Ranger platoons underneath him, but then he also has a Delta Force troop underneath him as well. And then you could have up in north, right? You could have that whole region up north in Afghanistan is run by Task Force, Delta Force, Task Force Green. They're run by them, but there could be Ranger platoons underneath that are working for them that ultimately still then report under Rangers. It's just weird how it works, man. You could have the outstational regional commands be Rangers, Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, whatever, even though the overarching thing was still run by the Ranger Regiment, if that makes sense.
Wow. Yeah, that it does. And that is just wild, keeping up with the many tentacles of JSOC. That is crazy. When you get done with the tour where here that you've made the jump and running missions, and you guys get back stateside, are you what's going on? Are you doing more training, or are you getting ready to has RRD come across your radar yet, or is that not quite yet on the horizon?
It's not quite yet on the horizon, because I came back from that trip, went to Ranger School, remember, and then I went straight through Ranger School. So I got lucky there, just went through as fast as you possibly can, graduated, and then came back a couple months later and became a team leader. And then I deployed again to Afghanistan, and then I came back from that trip to Afghanistan. I went to PLDC, which is a course called, it's Primary Leadership Development Course is what it used to be called. It's an E5 course. So when you're an E5, you have to go to that to learn to be an E5. So I went to that course, and it's a regular Army course that we're required to go to. And it was right there on Fort Benning. And one of the other E5s in the course with me was a medic, one of the team medics in RRC. And I was like, wow, what the heck? I was like, what's this all about? And so he told me a little bit about it, and that intrigued me. And then later on, I was after I left 3rd Ranger Battalion, I was RIP cadre doing RIP, running our selection stuff. And then I got asked to do a Omega trip, doing the Omega program. And that's when the second Omega trip that I did, I actually bumped into RRD at the time. And I was like, this is what you guys do? I was like, man, this is awesome. So it made me want to go there. And I'll pause there because that's kind of getting way ahead.
Yeah. Wow. I did not even realize that was, I was under the assumption it was vice versa there. That's quite interesting. Omega was first in the pipeline, or career pipeline, I should say. Wow.
Yeah, I did that as a Line Ranger Battalion guy. Essentially, I wasn't even an RRC guy at the time. RRD was doing that job, but they pulled out of it because they had other stuff that they were doing that was, that they thought was more important or fun, or active, I guess. And so they pulled out of that, and then it got passed down to the Line Ranger Battalions to fill the Omega positions.
Wow. Okay. So, man, that's crazy. Okay. So you get back into Afghanistan, and I think this is actually, I know I was looking it through, and I think, is this the Afghanistan tour where you actually earn a Silver Star for this, I think it's a compound or maybe several compound shootout that you get into?
That was actually in Iraq a little bit later. That was in Iraq. So Iraq in 05. Yep. So I was back and forth Iraq, Afghanistan, and then really heavy in Afghanistan the last few years.
Wow. Okay. Gee. So I know something big happened. Did you got wounded in on the next Afghan tour, didn't you? Was that the grenade where dudes were just dropping grenades like hot potatoes on top of you?
Yeah, but that was in Iraq.
Okay, in Iraq. Geez, I've got that completely wrong. Could you could you walk us through? I know you probably told it 100 times at least, but could you walk us through that? Because that is honestly one of the craziest things I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, so we got some intel about some targets in Tal-Afar Iraq, and we were in Mosul at the time. Our vehicles were strikers, or we could fly in with helicopters, but on this one we did strikers, so like our armored vehicles. So at the time we had regular army unit assigned to us to drive our strikers and man them and stuff like that, and then we would just go in the back as assaulters. And so we had to we trained with them a good bit to make sure they understood how we wanted to work it, and then we had one of our weapons squad leaders riding with them to kind of oversee everything and command and control everything. So anyway, we took off, went on this mission. We ended up hitting. We had 3 targets that we were going after. We hit the first target, killed a couple people there. Pretty uneventful other than that. And then we went to the second target, and the second target is where this happened. We had briefed the commander outside of the town. So let me paint the scenario. So this town was kind of cordoned off by the army because it was so bad that like the regular army tankers would try to go through and they'd be popped out of the hatch driving through town. They were getting sniped by snipers. And then they were getting IED'd really hard too. So they pulled out of the city, cordoned the whole city. And a lot of people don't realize like that's what Rangers did in Iraq for the most part. Like in Ramadi and Fallujah and all the places where the Marines were having issues. Yeah, we would come in at night and lay the smack down on stuff just to bust it up so that they could get in and do what they needed to do during the day. And that's kind of what we were doing in Tal-Afar. So the regular army and the Marines couldn't even get in this city because they were just getting smashed. So they called us to loosen that city up. So what we did is just we'll go in there and just we call it like whack-a-mole. Like the bad guys are coming up, we're just whacking a mole. We whack him and he pops up somewhere else. And then we go and whack him over there. So we went in there and to hit these targets. And long story short, we had coordinated with the regular army saying like, hey, stay out of the city. Don't fly over. We want to be sneaky going in here so we can do as much damage as possible before we get out. And so we sneak in there, we get in, hit the first target, then we go to the second target. And as we pull up to the second target, we're sneaking in on foot. We can't get our strikers really that close because it's kind of loud. So we sneak in on foot, getting ready to breach the door, and then a helicopter flies over, one of the regular army helicopters. And then we hear on the radio, like ISR, that the bad guys are moving and they're getting ready. There's people on the roof moving and stuff like that. So we're paying attention now. And I'm across the way because I wasn't the first assault team on this mission. We rotated that so these don't get burnt out. So I was watching from across the way, scanning the rooftop of the building, doing cross coverage and stuff like that. And as we get ready to breach the target, the bad guys open the door. So the lead breach guy sees it, and he's like, compromise, and just boots the door in and goes right in. But the bad guy had opened the door, and then when he shut it, he dropped a grenade and just ran and dove into a room. And so as soon as those guys went in the door, the first 4 dudes took point-blank grenade shrapnel all into their legs. Took a lot of them down, but they continued pushing through the room and cleared and they were in then I pushed past those guys into the room. I go into the first room and on the left, and I see a guy on NE4 like pushing himself on his arms, like dragging himself back through the room like this. And I see he's bleeding a little bit, but he's fine for the most part. And I asked him if he's okay. He said, yeah, I'm good, Sergeant. He's like, I'm just shot up a little bit. And so I was like, all right, take care of yourself, do self-aid. And then I went into the next room, and there's like a squad leader kind of leaning up against the wall, holding his arm like this, and there's blood streaming down out of his arm. And I asked him if he's okay. I'm like, you good, man? Can you take care of that? You need me to patch you up? He's like, nah, I'm good. I'm good. I can take care of myself. So we just kept rolling to the next room, and then my platoon leader calls me, and there's a room across the way. He's like, Mike, get in there and clear with your team, with your squad. He's like, I just saw dudes go in there with an AK. And I'm like, all right. So I'm getting ready to go in this room that I know the dude finally went into with an AK. So that pucker factor comes up. I go across, go into this room. And now my platoon leader has started shooting into that room. And then he stopped shooting, and I start going into it. And as I go into the room and go in there, there's nobody there. Like there's nothing in the room. Like there's a bicycle leaning against the wall, not a rug, not a mat, nothing on the wall. It's just a bare room. And I'm like, where did this dude go? And I'm like, what the heck? maybe he went somewhere else and the PL thought he went in this room. I don't know. So then we go to clear another room. He's like, hey, clear over here. We get ready to go in another room. And I'm the number 1 guy. And believe it or not, my platoon leader is stacked right behind me as the number 2 guy. And we're getting ready to go through this room. And a grenade rolls to the door right in front of me, like in front of my feet. And it's kind of like, you know, you hear in the movies, like sometimes it's weird how time can be, like when your adrenaline starts pumping. So I see this grenade and I'm like, man, I'm about to be an ugly son of a gun because I'm thinking it's about to blow up in my face. And I have that time to ponder it, but then I just kicked it. I just booted it back into the room as hard as I could. And I don't know how long I had, but I booted it back in the room. And as I kicked it, I turned and dove away and it went off and it still had line of sight on us, I guess, because I caught some pieces in the back. And then there were some wounded dudes in the area behind me. I dove on top of those guys. One of them was my roommate at the time and a close friend of mine and one of my guys, actually. And I dove that way to protect him. And so my body armor caught most of the grenade shrapnel, but I still caught some of my shoulder and the backside of my butt and legs. But for the most part, it wasn't that bad. I mean, it didn't cause a whole lot of damage. It just stung like a bee sting. And then we kept going, kept clearing. And I went across the courtyard and there's the bad guys on top of the roof are engaging our sniper teams. So our sniper teams had climbed the roof next door to suppress from sniper coverage on top. And they're getting shot at by a machine gun from the roof. Meanwhile, we're getting shot at by a machine gun from inside the house. And then dudes are on top of the roof with like 5-gallon buckets prepped with grenades, just like kadoosh, 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 just raining grenades on top of us while we're in the house. So we push across from this. One of my guys takes a burst of AK in it, or the machine gun shot him in the shoulder and in the leg. So he goes down. As I'm the lead guy clearing across this courtyard, he goes down behind me. I didn't see him go down. Go into the room to clear this room. I only have one other dude with me. I'm like, what the heck? Where are my dudes? Go back out, and I see it's because one of my dudes got smoked behind me going into the room. And he didn't die, though. Thank God. It just hit him in his shoulder, deflected down, blew out that artery. But one of my team leaders who was there, this big dude named Jeremiah, super good dude who was a freshly trained EMT and all that kind of stuff, Ranger first responder. So he gets in there, crams a ton of gauze in his armpit, pins his arm down, and was able to keep pressure on it, save that dude's life. While he's treating that dude, a bad guy comes up from behind him. I don't know if I've told this story. I think I have. From behind him, starts choking him out with his rifle sling while he's working on my dude that's wounded. And luckily, another ranger comes up and sees the guy and smokes the dude that has him by the thing. Because the dude was choking him by his sling, and this guy's trying to fight him off. But mind you, my team leader who's trying to fight this off, he's been wounded too. So his arms are wounded with grenade shrapnel, and he's trying to fight this dude off. And he ends up taking the dude to the ground and starts choking that guy with his sling. And then another ranger buddy comes up over his shoulder and just shoots the dude point blank in the face and kills him. But it was like literally close combat, man. Like dudes are moving amongst our ranks at times. It was pretty chaotic because there was a lot of grenades going on, machine guns fired all over the place. Obviously, it's at nighttime. So I ended up getting hit by more grenade shrapnel on the arm and this right wrist. So I couldn't, after a while, this hand went numb because of the pressure. It shut off these nerves and I couldn't use this hand that well. So I ended up handing my rifle off to another guy. And then I took his pistol. So I had a pistol and I was running around shooting left-handed with a pistol in and around the target as we were kind of consolidating this. And then the reason that I got the Silver Star was because of the diving to protect that dude from the grenade shrapnel, for one. But then really kind of taking charge because my platoon leader and my platoon sergeant were actually pinned down at the time. So they were the leaders, but they couldn't do anything because they were pinned down in another room. So I kind of took charge and brought the strikers up and started getting our medevac going so we could get our casualties out before they died. And then as we did that, the Rangers are fighting and they're starting to eliminate targets. One of my Ranger buddies on the roof, who is a sniper, told me about, he finally just popped up to a knee and just took a lucky shot and smoked the machine gun. While it's like hammering at him with machine gun rounds, he just slips off to the side and hops up, takes a lucky shot, gets the machine guns. So they neutralized a little bit of that threat enough to where we could pull out safely, get our dudes and get out of there. And then we called in airstrikes and leveled pretty much that whole city block, because there was dudes coming from blocks away. And I think they estimated it was like 150, 200 guys coming at us from that target. We were probably fighting with 25 to 50 guys on target and next door, maybe more. And then more guys were coming from around. So we just fought what we could, get out of there, got our casualties rolled out, and then just waited till the reinforcements came and hit them with indirect fire, basically.
Holy crap. So all of this was all at nighttime?
Yeah, this all happened in about 30 minutes. So from the time we went into the house to the time we were wheels up rolling out with all of our casualties was probably 30 minutes. And we had probably killed 40 or 50 dudes on target. I can't remember the official numbers. I think it was like 50 with direct fire. And then nobody got killed from us, but we had a lot of dudes shot up and wounded. But we got out of there, and then we leveled that whole thing. And I think they estimated we killed roughly like 200 people with all the close air support and everything. Because the dudes that we killed, there's guys that came to get the bodies, and then like tons of more people. So who knows whether they were bad or not, but they got killed.
Jeez. Wow. And I definitely do not remember hearing, and several people in the chat don't remember the choking incident. I had not heard that before. That is just equally insane. And thank God he was able to muster the strength to throw him over his shoulder, and that Ranger was steady enough to do that. That's and at nighttime, what were y'all's night vision capabilities at this time? Were they, I mean, I'm sure nothing like today, but I mean,
wow. This was in the beginning, yes. So that I think we were all running dual tube night vision, like PVS 15s at the time. So they're the old school green ones, but I'm pretty sure we all had dual tube night vision by then, and running lasers and stuff like that on our rifles. So we were really effective at night. We trained. I mean, that's the thing in the Ranger Regiment. We train everything at night again and again and again. We do a little at day just to kind of like make sure it's safe, and then we just do everything at night. So we're really good. We were really good at running with night vision and lasers at night and clearing rooms. So it was no big deal. But when there's guns and people shooting back at you, things change. You know what I mean? Things slow down. You have to handle situations differently. Sometimes you have to take a tactical pause and see how to better take out this situation. Or sometimes you need to back up and just hit it with other assets, right? So there's no telling.
I mean, and all of that kicking off because you guys y'all specifically tell them don't fly over the area, and boom, right as y'all are going to work, they fly over. I mean, that did that ever get back? Did y'all ever mention that again? Or was it just like, thank God we're alive and got the hell out of Dodge?
I don't know. Maybe it did. It had to have possibly. I don't know. We were definitely worried about getting the heck out of Dodge, because we went back to that location. It may have been mentioned. It had to have, because we went back to the location where we briefed that regular Army commander before we went in. And that's where we staged with them to call in medevac birds to medevac out our wounded that needed immediate treatment. And then the rest of us, like me and some of the other guys that weren't wounded that bad, we rode the 2-hour striker drive back to the hospital.
And I had forgotten about the strikers. I had read, I've got Jack's book, Jack Murphy, and forgotten until reading his and then listening to some other interviews about you guys using the strikers. What's that like, getting to use that piece of equipment? I don't think I know I've never spoke to anybody except maybe Jack that's ever utilized one of those in combat.
They're pretty decent. I mean, they can take a pretty good hit. They were fast and nimble, and that's the main reason we wanted them, because they were fast and nimble, but they were armored a lot more than a Humvee or anything. But on that one, you have to ask Jack. Jack talks about it. Jack was on that deployment. He was with the other platoon, and Jack talks about it when we came back from that deployment, because like there was a lot of dudes bleeding in those strikers. And then like I said, I was wounded, but I was bleeding still in that striker too. A lot of other guys were. And then we took some of the bad guys with us alive, and they fought back in the striker, and one of them got killed. by a fire extinguisher, actually. So a guy ended up smashing his face in with a fire extinguisher. So, like, needless to say, the backs of these strikers were filled with blood. And Jack talks about it. He was like blown away, like when they came in and like they rolled down the ramps and they're out there with hoses and there's blood just flowing out of the back of these strikers, like just like a river. You know what I mean?
Gosh, like the chopper scene in We Were Soldiers, where it's just mixed. Oh wow, jeez Louise.
Yeah, there was a lot of dudes bleeding in those things. And you got to realize we hauled a lot of our worst guys out to the helicopters, but they still rode in those strikers bleeding, you know, and we stopped the bleeding and stuff too, but there's still a lot of blood that gets out, you know.
And where are y'all housed at? Where is the Ranger compound or base at that you guys were operating out of?
We were operating out of a base there in Mosul, in northern Iraq at the time.
Wow, you've definitely mentioned and my little bit of knowledge, some very hot areas here this past 55 minutes. And I'm sure, guys, we've mentioned a lot. We'll probably end up having to do a part 2, and we'll be getting into your questions here in just a moment. But I figured we've got about 30 minutes or so left. I figured we could cover a little bit more and close with some questions. But let's see. You go on to Iraq, back to Afghanistan. So my timeline was wrong. RRD is not next. You're getting into the Omega missions and all of that. Where originally are you coming into a prior team or organization that Omega set up, or are you coming in and setting things up, or how has this even come about, you being on an Omega team?
Yeah, it's kind of already set up. So it was essentially a program, which it's not like what necessarily a lot of people think. It was just a program where the CIA and then special operations units worked together to achieve a certain goal. And it was nothing much more than what we were doing now, but it was like, but you had more senior dudes there because you're having, you know, the military guys that did the Omega program for the most part was SEAL Team 6 and Ranger Battalion. There was probably some times where the Delta Force guys were doing it too, but it was mainly the SEAL Team 6 guys and Ranger Battalion guys, and the RRD guys. But then RRD ended up pulling out of it to do other things, and then they passed it down to Line Ranger Battalion. So, yeah, it was cool. We would show up, and the infrastructure was all there because there was guys there before us, and you just show up. And like, for example, when I went over to be the team leader, I went over and the team leader that I was replacing was an RRD guy. So I just talked to him like, hey, what's up, man? And he's like, hey, this is how we work stuff. This is how we plan our missions. This is where the chow hall is. These are the things. Here's all the products. Here's the missions we've already done. And he just kind of passes me off everything he's done and shows me how he did it. And then because I had never been the team leader before, I had been an assistant team leader at an outstation like this before, but had never been the full team leader. So he showed me that stuff, and it was pretty easy. I'd already kind of done a lot of it already, but it just made it, you know, to where I could be more efficient. And then we would do a couple missions where they would lead it, and then like a mission or two where he would lead it, and then I would kind of watch. And then ideally, and then you do a mission where they get to go and watch and you lead it. So that's what we try to do. We try to do a thorough transition. It doesn't always happen that way, but in this case, I got a little bit of time to work with this guy and learn and go on a practice mission with him, and then came back, and then I was in charge. So I would just go and get briefs from intel from the regular Army. I would sit in their intel briefs. I would sit in the JSOC intel briefs that I would have automatically in my little own office. And then I would sit in on the CIA intel briefs as well. And then we would just develop our targets from whichever packet we wanted to go after. And then we would put it together, and then we would strike that target. But we would take Indige instead of Rangers or Delta Force guys or whatever. We had Afghans that would go fight, and we would take them to go fight, and then we were the leadership of it. And so the CIA dudes would be controlling the dudes on the ground, and then I was ultimately the ground force commander. So I would control the air assets, the flight assets, the helicopters, the logistics, the tactical plan, and all that piece. And then everybody else was just facilitators within that.
Wow, that actually has a little bit of a Vietnam esque ring to it there operationally with the Indige and everything. Were these Indige? I'm assuming since they're working with CIA and JSOC, they're highly vetted. Are these guys? Do they have a lot of experience, or is their first time experience coming in with you guys, getting trained and running missions with you guys?
Some of these guys were experienced, like Mujahideen and stuff like that, that have fought against different, factions and stuff, and the Russians back in the day. So some of the core guys or the leadership of those guys were that, but a lot of these guys came in and they got a lot of combat. So you got to realize we're rotating in for 4 months and then we go back home for 6 months. When we're home for 6 months, those same dudes are fighting with our buddies for 4 more months, and then the next group of buddies for 4 more months, and then we come back and we ride them hard for another 4 months. So they did get breaks and they did get leave, but those dudes were in virtually continuous combat.
Yeah, I mean that that sounds like the Montagnards with the SOG guys. They just stay in the fight nonstop. That is
Yeah.
wow. I was looking up there, and there's actually, let me see if I have this and see if this is right about the different Omega teams, because I was curious where you were at or stationed. I think it's got the different Omega teams here. Is that
Mhm.
remotely correct?
Yeah, it looks about right, man. Looks pretty decent to me. Yeah.
Are you allowed to say which team you were on or
Yeah,
which?
I did Omega 40 and Omega 50,
Oh, wow.
and I was the one in Oregon E. There was like a split there, but yeah, I did 40 and 50. And I've been to all the other ones as well and done some work, but I actually was assigned to 40 and 50.
Wow. Okay. I think one of our prior guests, Gary Harrington, talked about setting up Orgoon. I think I may have to check that. That's pretty interesting. That popped up again. Yeah, Frank, that actually kind of does sound like the PRU. I was talking to somebody about them earlier today. Um, with and you mentioned the SEALs being working a lot with the Rangers on this. By chance, did you know which squadron this was? Were they actually squadrons, or were these guys, shall we say, sheep dipped or whatever, and taken off a team and brought in, or how was that working?
No, these guys typically they would assign an entire squadron just to it. They would call it the Omega Squadron.
Wow.
So they'd have it like, for example, one time I did it, I was with the Red Squadron guys. So all the dudes
Oh,
that I worked out with, all the different Omega outstations, were all Red Squadron guys. And then the Rangers were 375 guys because, obviously I was with 375. We're actually, I think on those trips when I did the Omega times, I was over with 175. So most of all the Rangers were 175 guys, even though I wasn't. Um, yeah, it's just like a hodgepodge team. But it would work like this, for example. Like when I was in charge, I had myself as the team leader, which is like the ground force commander, bringing it all together and coordinating and managing the whole thing. Then I had another assistant team leader, and assistant team leader, who was a ranger from the battalion recce platoon, really solid dude. And then I had a ranger medic who handled all of our medical stuff if one of us was to get wounded. Then I had a ranger guy who was in charge of comms, who was a radio telecommunicator, comms expert there to handle all of our radios and help us with that. And then I had a SEAL, a Navy SEAL assigned to us, and he was helping us out because he was actually JTAC certified. And so that's who we got as a JTAC. He was a Whiteside SEAL that was an augmentee to the program. And then out at the other outstations, there were the SEAL Team 6 guys. Now, when I worked with Red Squadron that time, I was the only Ranger, and it was just Red Squadron SEAL Team 6 dudes on the team with me. And they had SEAL Team 6 medics, and they had their own comms dude. It was kind of the same package, but they manned it because they were the team leader. And then when I was the team leader later on, I manned it, but I had SEALs working for us as well too. Like, it was a hodgepodge team, but it worked good.
wow. That's quite interesting. The setup. Is this an Omega team right here?
Yep, that's an Omega 50 back in the day.
Wow. Yeah, that and actually I'm glad I saw that picture. I don't know if we'll hit it, but I know there's an MP7 story that is pretty notorious. I know you've probably been asked this, but it comes up a lot, and especially now, I guess, with how in the news the Navy guys are, how much they stay in it. Were they pretty receptive with working with Rangers? Were they not, I hate to say nice, but were they okay with you guys, or were they, I hate to say, dicks?
It depends. The Red Squadron guys that I worked with, they were super professional dudes, man. They were good dudes. No complaints there. In Somalia, I worked with Gold Squadron. Same thing. Really superstar. I mean, good dudes there. Really good guys. There's now, like, by good, I mean we didn't have any issues like physically or with any relationships. We got along great. You know what I mean? But there was times where Blue Squadron, I worked with them a decent amount of times, and I didn't like a lot of those guys. Maybe it was just the squadron that I was with, but a lot of those guys were really out of shape, and they couldn't shoot worth a darn, and weren't tactically sound either. And they treated our dudes like crap. And there was one instance where when I was later on the platoon sergeant of the mortar platoon after I left RRC, and we had an issue in JBAD where my Rangers were telling me, they're like, hey, the SEAL Team 6 dudes won't let us use the gym. And they're telling us we have to use the same showers that the locals use. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me right now? So I went over there, flew out there and went in there and talked to a bunch of dudes and sorted all that out. But I was like, how dare you guys? Like, you didn't pay for this. SEAL Team 6 didn't pay for this. This is a JSOC compound. Everybody that works for JSOC gets to get these facilities. But that's happened more than one occasion. They do that to a lot of other people or other elements, and it's sad. But they're not all like that. You know, there's bad eggs in all the different organizations. But you know, I just saw some weird things there.
Yeah, there's, like you said, there's bad apples in every bunch. But God, I hate hearing that, especially when y'all are in such a high up playing for keeps game here, that they're going to be pulling some little stuff like that.
Who knows? It may have gotten better since then. You know, my interactions with them were a long time ago, 10, 15, 20 years, 10, 15 years ago now. If you really think about it, all that combat stuff was at least, I've been retired for 6 years, so it's at least 10, 15 years ago.
Wow. And there was still a lot of combat to be done in between those 10 and 15 years. Good Lord. It's crazy hearing guys thinking there at the beginning they were going to miss it if they weren't there by 01 or 2002.
I did.
Yeah.
I thought that too.
That's just wild. Let's see here. We've got about 15 minutes and we'll close with some questions. I was curious with Omega, and you mentioned all the assets. On one of your previous interviews, you mentioned actually several, but one helicopter crash. It was like I think you said a Mi-47. I think, was this an Omega crash that you were on, or was this no?
I probably said MH-47. But I have flown on the the Mi-17s and stuff like that a good bit too. Never been on a crash in those. But this was an MH-47. Well, it wasn't technically an MH-47. It was technically CH-47, because the MH ones are the ones that we had within, the 160th and stuff like that. And this deployment, we were so busy and there were so many task forces that there wasn't enough 160th to go around. So we were using DH birds, like direct. I think that's what DS birds, as they call them, direct support birds. So they weren't MHs, and they weren't really trained to land and fly at night on brownout conditions. So that's why we had issues. And we had some legitimate crash landings where the bird was broken afterwards, but nobody got hurt. So it was good.
Wow. That it doesn't matter if it's as y'all would say, or some of the guys would say, not too bad. It seems like any helo crash is bad news. I can't imagine. It sounds like y'all did quite a bounce up and came back up, and then did y'all actually did the aircraft breach the compound wall that y'all were going into?
we ended up, on that one target, the bird bounced up in the air, came back around, and we ended up breaching the wall or hitting the wall and knocking it down with the helicopter. So we came off the helicopter and we're like, wait a minute, the target's behind us. And we turn around and we're like, oh, the helicopter made the hole. So we went through.
That is great. Was everybody all right? I mean, y'all literally could continue on?
Yeah, everybody was fine, but the helicopter, a wheel came off. And they told us to try to get the wheel, and we're like, that thing's the size of a Volkswagen Bug. We can't carry that thing.
I was about to say, not unless we got a crane here. Yeah, that's grab the wheel.
Yeah, bring it back for us.
That's great. Oh man. Let's see. I guess maybe we can tell a story and then we'll close out with some questions and everything. Because actually I hear my little rescue kitty, I hope hadn't been caught up in the audio, going crazy, probably wanting to eat. Would you gosh, yeah, you're definitely gonna have to come back because we've barely gotten into any of your resume and some other stuff. But I had one person reach out and ask, you actually had some fairly interesting checkpoint stories, but will you talk about the one story? I believe you're with Ground Branch at this particular roadblock. You're going out with the AFO force, I think, in a van in Afghanistan.
Oh, you mean like where we roll up to the house where we're doing the recce on the house?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that one, that's when I was with the AFO team. We go up to do recce on the house. So we're just getting eyes on the target and kind of making sure the bad guys are where we think they're going to be before we hit it. And we had this assault force, the indige with all of our guys staged, just a few minutes down the road. So if the crap hits the fan, we can call them and they can come bail us out because we've only got 2 guns in the fight. Well, we had 2 indige that had guns too, but I don't really trust. I don't count their guns. Those are extra if they hit anything. You know what I mean? But I'm only counting on me to hit stuff and the other Americans. So we go up in there. We pull up to this target building, and as we're sitting there, like there's dudes in like Afghan National Army or police uniforms, and so they come up to the car, start talking to the indige, and they're like, oh, what are you guys doing? We're like, oh, we're just telling them lies, about what we're actually doing, just saying, hey, we're cruising through the area. We're part of like a humanitarian assistance. We're just looking for IEDs to try to clean them up so no one gets hurt, right? Something to that effect. And then they weren't buying it. They were like, hey, we're calling the Taliban on you guys. And then we're like, okay. So they go back and they're talking with our indige drivers and TC for the longest time. And meanwhile, me and the agency dude are in the back talking it out like on comms, like, hey, like be prepared with this. And like I'm facing the rear, but I can kind of look back and see to the front. I'm like, hey, let me know I'm getting ready. I've got my hand on the hatch because I had a quick hatch in the back where I could pop the whole back hatch and be out of the completely out of the van super fast. And so I was ready to pull that hatch. And these dudes started coming down the road. We could see them like in the distance, 300 or 400 meters, 200 or 300 meters away. It's at night with night vision, so it's not too far. We see dudes coming and they've got AKs and RPKs and PK, like you name it, they have everything. RPGs running down the road coming at us, like a whole group of dudes. Well, they're walking at first, and then after a while, they start kind of coming a little bit faster. And we had already called it up to our assault force and let them know. So they're already en route, and I'm getting ready to hop out of the back of this thing and just start tagging dudes, laying down suppressive fire. And I only had an MP7 on this one too, so like not a lot of firepower. But I was just going to start pegging dudes and then let the vehicle bail out of there and hit the road. And then I was going to break contact. I figured I could hit them hard enough to where that vehicle could get safe. And then I could just pop around the wall and run a kilometer down the road and link up with them. But luckily that didn't happen. Like we were counting down to we were probably like 10 seconds into the countdown whenever our assault force came around, and those dudes scattered like cockroaches, man.
What was the reaction force made up of more Americans, or was it more the indige as well, or
a little bit of both? The lead vehicle was one of our vehicles with Americans in it, and then everything behind it was like tons of gun trucks with 50 cals and everything with the indige. So we had them outgunned big time once those guys showed up, so it wasn't an issue.
Jeez, I could imagine the pucker factor on that. Your butt would have been eating your pants through the seat. God.
Yeah, I've done a bunch of things like that. Like there's a lot of different times been out low vis and run into weird situations. I've had another one similar to that. Yeah, there's just, I mean, I've had it rolling through from Kandahar up to the big army base up there, and we're driving around low-vis in the daytime and almost get shot at by regular army because they think like we just look like Afghans, you know what I mean, to them. And we rolled up on their car and we're trying to like show VS-17 panels. We got an American flag. We're like, Americans, just so you know, we look weird, but we're Americans, because they'll shoot you up quick, man. They're a lot of these. You got to realize some of these regular army soldiers, it's their first time ever in combat, and they got some weird car with some weird looking dudes that don't quite look Afghan, but they kind of do, with guns rolling up on them, or especially they didn't see our guns typically because we had them hidden. But we're just trying to blend in, and they see our car. And we're just trying to roll by them, and they're just keeping us off, man. I've had 50 cal shot right over the top of the roof. Yeah, we see the laser dancing in the windshield, and we're like, stop, pull over. We pull over, and it's like, bop, 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 snap, 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 right over the top of a thin-skinned Toyota Corolla car.
God, I mean, you've had, and thank goodness we'll have a part 2, because you've gotten into some just absolutely insane incidences, not just in combat, but I mean, it seems like you had run-ins with the ANA or the Afghan National Police on several occasions. It seems like they were sketchy to say the very, very least.
Yeah, they were. It was hard to trust them. A lot of times they were paid by the Taliban, so they were being taken. I mean, they didn't make a lot of money, so they're making money on the side doing that, and then they would take us out or try to come after us whenever they could.
God, it's crazy when you get down into the weeds and talk to vets and on the ground level how much this just sounds eerily just like a replay of Vietnam. Just crazy. Let me go through some questions because I know we've got our time limit here. If we've got time, let's see if we can hit this one. We didn't cover much of it, but I would be interested. Michael Griffin was curious of the origin of the RRC or RRD, whichever one we'd like to go with, or the correct nomenclature or word.
Yeah, it started off as RRD, which was Regimental Reconnaissance Detachment, and it was small. It was super small. And then it became RRC later on when it became a company. It started in roughly 1984, I think, with the creation of 3rd Ranger Battalion. And don't quote me on that. I may be a little off on some of the history because my memory's crappy. But they had the long-range reconnaissance or surveillance teams, the LURS teams in Vietnam. So I'm sure there's a little bit of lineage dating back to that. And you think about it back in the Revolutionary War, they were probably doing reconnaissance back there. So I could see it probably dating back really to the lineage of the Ranger Regiment, all the way back as probably as far as the 1600s. And like, I think it was Benjamin Church's War or something like that. But yeah, I think it could trace back to that. And I'm sure there's lineage tied to Vietnam, like we talked about.
Yeah, and as in part 2, we'll get into some more stuff, but one of our viewers was talking, and we've had Ed Walkoff on, who is a legendary SOG vet, who's anybody that's ever looked at SOG pictures. He's the young guy with the headband on with the RPD. He said in his book, RRC is the closest thing to a modern SOG that the U.S. has. So, and we actually were talking about that offline, and that's how I kind of came to find you, and gladly you accepted to talk to us today. What are your thoughts on that when people say that? You serving in the detachment or the company, do you kind of feel that with your research on SOG and such?
Possibly, yeah, because I studied that stuff, MACV-SOG and all that stuff, a lot back when I was a kid. Actually, a lot of that stuff is what I read, a lot of those books and stuff, which actually made me want to do what I did. So yeah, I do think, especially with the Omega stuff that we did and stuff like that, it really is similar. So, and I would love to talk to some of those guys and hear the intricacies of how they did it, because, you know, now, like back when I was reading it, I didn't know anything about it, but now I know about it, and I'd love to talk to some of those guys and see, you know, how they did things in slightly different ways, possibly.
We're gonna have to set that up. Heck, we can probably get Mr. Ed to talk to you. Heck, having y'all two on together would be interesting, hearing about that and hearing about Omega just in what little bit we've spoken about today. I didn't realize how soggy or CIDG that sounded, working with the Indig like y'all did in low vis. It's very interesting. Sorry guys, we got a lot of comments, and I apologize I wasn't paying attention to all of them. Any opinions on when Ranger Recon changed from the detachment to the company? You kind of just spoke about it, but do you have any personal opinions? I suppose, is it getting bigger?
Yeah, it just got a little bit more robust. They ended up bringing in more people and bringing in more support guys and stuff like that, because we ended up increasing more teams as well. We had 3 teams at one point in time that went up to 6 teams, and then more support and stuff like that as well.
Wow. And we'll end up getting into it, but it was fairly interesting to see. I hope that's not my audio. I think it is. About how close, as we've heard, y'all work with Delta, the Rangers, and the detachment, but how the selection course to the OTC is based on the Delta training course, or training course. I thought that was pretty cool as well.
Yeah, ROC selection is based off of Delta Forces selection, because they have a very thorough, very good selection. I mean, look at the product that they get up there. So the regiment was like, hey, we're going to revamp our stuff and change it when they started modernizing things. And I don't know when they changed it to that. It was before I went through. But they I guess they sent some guys up there, or had some guys go up there and see how it's run, and then came back and did something slightly different. It's in different terrain, slightly different. It's in the similar terrain. It's still in the mountains, but the mountains of North Georgia, from what I've heard of the guys that go to both, is a little bit rougher at times. So that's where we did it at.
Yeah, I've seen some pictures from West Virginia, and it definitely looks gnarly. But if you've ever been in North Georgia, my God Almighty, those mountains and those hills are on a whole another level.
Yeah, and it's in North Georgia, even kind of stretching into North Carolina and Tennessee, I believe. The different range of all the area that we train in, because it's a big national forest up there. So yeah, you're talking, and think about it, in North Carolina and southwestern North Carolina are like the highest mountains in the Appalachians. So it's like right close to that area. There's some big mountains, big rugged mountains in that area, east of the Mississippi anyway.
Wow. I'm sure, I know we'll end up getting into some more of that. That's always interesting to hear and I can only imagine what all they're going into with the lessons learned from Iraq and Afghanistan. There was a question about Omega that I wanted to see if we could hit real quick. Apologies, guys. Until I find it. If you had one optic choice, what would it be for your weapon?
Oh, that's a hard one. I don't know. 99% of everything that I did, I can't say that much. I'd say 90% of everything that I did that required an optic, I usually use something like an EOTech or something with a low magnification so that I could shoot close range. And like I found, I've even shot competitions with like an EOTech out to 300 meters and did good on that too. I found they're pretty accurate out to that distance. But if I had to go to anything, yeah, I'd say probably something like that, some sort of hollow sight that I could shoot out about 300 with, because most everything's that distance and in with an assault rifle, you know.
Did Omega, well, RRD, I guess, was gathering intel. Did Omega have a sniper program?
No, everything that program had came from the units, right? So any snipers we had were Ranger snipers or SEAL Team 6 snipers or whatever. We had our own guys, and every dude, like, for example, when I was running it, we had a couple dudes that were sniper qualified on the team, me and one other dude, I think at least, if not more, at the time that were sniper qualified. So we had that capability as well.
There we go. Oh, I found it. Do you know how the Omega program grew from the initial invasion of Afghanistan?
I really don't know, because I kind of got into it and worked in it midpoint, I guess. And it was this, it was always that way from what I saw from the entire time. I don't know when the outstations got established and stuff like that. But they were, for pretty much the most part, established by the time I started working.
I'm going to post, I was doing a little bit of digging, and there's a website, I think Gray Dynamics did a little write-up. I just posted in the comment section. It looks kind of interesting, and tried to give a bit of a history. We've got just enough time. I think you may have an actual story about this, but Josh was curious. Can you tell us about your first MP7? Well, that's actually kill. Can you tell us about your MP7?
Yeah, so that MP7 that I had, it was actually a weapon from SEAL Team 6. They got them first, I believe. They were the first, I believe, to field them. And on that deployment, that was in 2007. That picture that you pulled up was that same deployment, and that was the time when, yeah, there you go. That's the same deployment as well. So I got that thing. We got them brand new. I sighted them in. I was one of the lead point guys or one of the point men on that, because this one I was working. There was a SEAL Team 6 guy was the team leader, and I was kind of the assistant team leader. And so I was the lead point man walking into a lot of our targets, and we used the MP7s because I know people might get mad about hearing this, but sometimes dogs will give you away sneaking in, and we use those to shoot the dogs, and or whatever else alerts on us when we come in, because it's quiet. So yeah, that's what I used that for. And then we went on this one mission. The first mission we got in a gunfight on, I was actually carrying an MP7 and shot several dudes on that. And I talked about that on several podcasts. I know you heard about that, but yeah, it doesn't have a lot of knockdown, but yeah, smoked several dudes with that thing.
More than several. That is that almost is like if it wasn't you personally telling it, and I heard someone telling it to me in passing or whatever. I'm like, what movie did you watch that from? That's clearly out of a movie.
Yeah, I think I shot 6 dudes on that one target. I personally, I think I killed 6 dudes with that MP7 on that target. And the interesting thing is, and people talk crap about it all the time, I don't know if it's true or not, but from what I was told by the SEAL Team 6 dudes, they're like, I think you're the first person to kill somebody with one of those. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Not that it matters, not that it even matters in any way, shape, or form, but I thought it was an interesting thing. Who knows if that's actually the case, but that's what they said at least.
Wow, and that's crazy. Seeing so, y'all were. I mean, did you say earlier on that you guys actually had them before the actual dev, like the SEAL, like DevGru had them and the squadrons had them?
No, they had him first. And the only reason I had it to use at that time was because I was doing the Omega and they brought those over. So I was rocking a normal M4 just like everybody else. But then they brought those over and they're like, hey, we're using these as our lead recce guys. So like we had 2 guys that would go out on point about a couple hundred meters, however we want to do it, in front of our lead element, just scouting the route. Because sometimes in Afghanistan, when you go to some of these targets, you may have to cross canals deep with water that are too deep to swim across, that are too deep to walk across, or not swim across, but yeah, too deep to walk across, or mountains and cuts and things like that, or canals that you got to go around. So we tend to have some dudes out in the front scouting it. And then it's easier for those guys to be light and have a light gun that's quiet. And so that's what we did, because they may run up on dudes digging in the road. Because I've had that happen where we're sneaking out and we catch a couple dudes digging in the middle of the night in the road. Most likely they're putting in IEDs, so we just smoke those dudes so that they don't alert on us going into the target. And then we'll just keep creeping ahead. But that's the main thing we use those rifles for. And like I said, it was the first deployment they had been used. And then right after that, we shot some people with it. Or I did. So it could be I was the first guy to shoot somebody. Who knows?
Did you, I mean, since you used a lot of weapons, would you, and I guess, as you said at the very, very beginning, each mission or what have you is going to have a different need for a weapon. How's that rank is your favorite weapons? Did you like the MP7 a whole lot? It sounds like it was a pretty dang good gun.
I liked it for low vis stuff and for certain things, but it's not something I would choose for a lot of things. Like if I'm going out on a regular raid to kick in doors and kill bad guys and think I'm going to get in a big gunfight, it's not the gun I necessarily want to carry. It's something that I want to be shooting at somebody ideally 50 yards and in, 75 yards and in with. And now it'll punch through at a distance, but it just doesn't have a lot of power. So it takes a lot of rounds, and you got to place them really well to do what you need to do with it.
Okay. And someone just texted me and will kill me if I don't ask about the tiger stripes and this particular photo that's been floating around Reddit.
Yep. What about it specifically?
Is this Omega era or
Yeah. Yeah, so we rocked the tiger stripes. We'd wear the desert ones sometimes, and sometimes we'd wear those jungle tiger stripes. And the cool thing is at nighttime, a lot of times at night, we would wear those, the dark ones, just because it's weird. They under night vision, they kind of blended in a little bit better.
God, that's so cool. I'm glad, really glad to see all of the tigers getting worn in modern times. It's really cool, and so used to seeing the Vietnam guys in the jungles and all that. It's really cool to see that desert aesthetic back there, as the people on Instagram like to call it. I believe we have. Oh, one last question about birds you guys would use. Did you ever use the Army's compartmentalized aviation bird? He thinks it's called an ATP.
Yeah, we flew on pretty much everything that there was that we had access to. I don't want to say.
I don't even know. I don't even know what the heck that is.
We flew on all different types of stuff.
Wow. We've got we're gonna hit it right here, the perfect timing for time limit. Do you think we can get you back to talk about some training and some other stuff from your career when you get some free time?
Yeah, let's do that. I'm pretty busy through the end of August, but maybe this fall.
Excellent. That will be excellent. And I noticed some people started watching here at the end. Guys, I'll go ahead and take pictures, screenshot these, and save these questions in my file. But is there anything you'd like to say or close with before we shut down for the afternoon?
No, thanks a lot for having me, and I hope everybody enjoys it. And yeah, I'll be happy to come back whenever we can make it work.
Absolutely. My schedule is always malleable. Just whenever you get free time, I know you're a busy man. We'd love to have you back. And guys, thank you all for watching. And Aaron, I just saw that. That's a great question. We'll get that in the fall. But I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll have you back. And Mr. Mike, thank you for joining us today, sir.
Thanks a lot, man. God bless you.